I turned 64 last March. I didn't throw a party. I sat on my back porch with a cup of coffee and watched the sun come up over the fence line, and I thought about how far I'd come from the woman who used to cry in her car before walking into work every morning. That woman didn't exist anymore. I made sure of that. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Wanda. I was a registered nurse for 31 years, 22 of them at Mercy General in Columbus, Ohio. I worked nights, holidays, double shifts when they needed me. I watched people take their last breath. I held hands of strangers because their families couldn't get there in time. I am not a woman who falls apart easily. I want you to understand that before I tell you what my son did to me. His name is Trevor. He's 38 now. When he was small, he used to run to the door every morning when I came home from a night shift, still in his pajamas, hair sticking up sideways, smelling like sleep. He'd wrap both arms around my leg and say, "You're back," like he'd genuinely been worried I wouldn't come back. I held on to that image for a long time, longer than I should have. His father, my husband Raymond, died 11 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. Went from diagnosis to gone in 4 months. Trevor was 27 at the time, already out of the house, already living his life. But Raymond's death did something to him that I didn't fully understand until much later. It made him impatient. Like he'd learned that things could be taken from you without warning, so you'd better grab what you could while you could. I didn't see it that way then. I told myself he was grieving. I told myself he'd find his footing. Raymond left me the house, a 3-bedroom in Worthington, north of Columbus. We'd paid it off the year before he got sick. 30 years of mortgage payments, and we'd finally done it. He used to joke that the house was our second retirement account. After he passed, it became my only real anchor. I kept working, kept saving, kept living quietly. I didn't need much. Over the years, I built up a solid nest egg. Not wealthy people money, nurse money. Careful, deliberate, set aside 20% of every paycheck money. By the time I retired at 62, I had the house assessed around $340,000 and just over $180,000 in savings between my 401k, a money market account, and a regular savings account at my credit union. That was everything. That was 31 years of night shifts and missed Christmases and sore feet and watching people die. That was my life in numbers. Trevor knew about all of it. Not the exact figures, but he knew I was comfortable. He was my son. I didn't hide things from him. I retired in the spring. Trevor and his girlfriend. Her name was Sasha. She'd been around about 2 years. Came to help me move a few boxes from my locker at the hospital. It was a nice day. We went to lunch after. He seemed happy for me. 6 months later, everything changed. It started with a phone call in October. Trevor's voice was different. Higher, faster, like he was trying to stay ahead of something. "Mom, I have news." "Okay," I said. I was folding laundry. "Sasha and I are getting married. We set a date. December 14th. I sat down on the edge of the bed. December 14th was 8 weeks away. Trevor, that's very soon. I know, but we don't want a long engagement. We just want to do it. Small ceremony, close family, maybe 100 people. 100 people in 8 weeks is not small, but I didn't say that. I said I was happy for him. I asked about Sasha, whether her family was involved in the planning. He said yes, her parents were helping. I asked about the venue. He said they'd found a place in Dublin, one of those converted barn venues, very popular, not cheap. "How much is it running?" I asked. "Well," he said, and that's when I heard it. That pause. That particular pause I'd learned to recognize over 38 years of knowing my son. The pause that meant something was coming that I wasn't going to like. "We're a little stretched right now. Sasha's parents are covering the catering and the flowers. I was hoping you might be able to help with the venue deposit, and maybe the photographer." "How much, Trevor?" "The venue is $8,500. Photographer is $3,200. $11,700. I took a breath. "I'll think about it," I said. I did think about it. I thought about it for 3 days. I'd been retired 6 months. That $180,000 was supposed to last me the rest of my life, supplemented by my Social Security when I turned 66. Pulling 11,700 hours out of it wasn't catastrophic, but it wasn't nothing either. I called my financial advisor, a woman named Denise who I'd worked with for 12 years, and asked her opinion. She said it was my money and my decision, but reminded me that retirement savings at my age needed to be treated carefully. I called Trevor back and said I could contribute $8,000. Not the full amount, but most of it. He thanked me. He sounded relieved. I transferred the money from my savings account. That was November 3rd. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't find out until much later, was that Trevor had already taken more than that. 3 weeks before he called me about the wedding, Trevor had gone to my credit union. Raymond and I had opened that joint account together before he passed. After Raymond died, I'd never removed Trevor's name from it. He was listed as a joint account holder, a decision I'd made years earlier, so that if something happened to me, he could access funds immediately without waiting on probate. A decision made from love. A decision I now understand was a catastrophic mistake. He walked into that branch, presented his ID, and withdrew $43,000. I didn't find out for 6 weeks. I don't check that account daily. It was my older savings account, the one I rarely touched. When I finally logged in to move some money before the holidays, I stared at the balance for a full minute before I understood what I was seeing. I called the credit union. They confirmed it. A withdrawal had been made on October 12th, in person, by an authorized joint account holder. Legal, they said. Nothing they could do. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after that call. The laundry was in the dryer. The TV was on in the other room, some cooking show with the volume low. My coffee had gone cold. I did not cry. I want to be clear about that. I did not cry. I felt something colder than crying. I felt my whole understanding of my son rearrange itself into something I didn't recognize. I called him that evening. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, Mom. What's up? Trevor." I kept my voice flat. "Do you want to tell me something?" Silence. "The credit union called me today," I said. That was a lie. I'd called them, but I wanted to see what he did with it. "Mom, $43,000, Trevor." He started talking fast. He said he'd meant to tell me. He said it was a loan, not a theft. He was going to pay it back. He said the wedding costs had spiraled, that Sasha's parents had backed out of some of their commitments, that he'd panicked. He said he knew he should have asked first. He said he was sorry. Sorry. I asked him when he planned to pay it back. He said after the wedding, once things settled down. I asked how, exactly, since I knew his finances well enough to know he didn't have that kind of money sitting somewhere. He got quiet. I told him I needed to think. I hung up and I called Denise. Then I called a lawyer, a woman who did estate planning and elder law, someone Denise had referred me to twice before. Her name was Priscilla, and when I explained the situation, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Wanda, I need you to listen to me very carefully." We met the next morning. Priscilla laid out my options plainly. Because Trevor was a joint account holder, the withdrawal was technically legal. Small claims wouldn't touch it. Civil court might, if I could prove the intent was fraudulent and the funds were understood to be mine alone. But it would be a long and expensive fight with uncertain outcome. However, and this is where she said pay attention, there were things I could do right now, immediately, to protect the assets I still had. She asked me about the house. The house was solely in my name. Raymond had been on the deed, but after he passed, I'd done the proper paperwork, and it transferred to me alone. Trevor had no legal claim to it, but she warned me, people in desperate situations do desperate things. There are ways to encumber a property, to file false liens, to create legal complications that can take years to unwind even if they ultimately fail. Her advice was to put the house into a revocable living trust that afternoon. Not eventually. That afternoon. We did it. She also advised me to close the joint account and open new accounts, savings, checking, solely in my name, with Trevor removed from everything. I did that the same week. I didn't tell Trevor any of this. The wedding happened. December 14th, a Saturday. I went. People ask why I went, and the honest answer is that I didn't know what else to do. I sat in the second row. I watched my son marry a woman in a barn draped in eucalyptus and white lights, and I thought about the $51,000, the $43,000 he took, and the $8,000 I'd given, and I felt like I was watching a stranger. Sasha was pretty. She seemed happy. I have no opinion about whether she knew what he'd done. I suspect she did, but that is not something I can prove. I said nothing at the reception. I hugged my son. I shook hands with her parents. I ate the chicken. I drove home alone. 3 weeks after the wedding, Trevor called to tell me that he and Sasha were moving. They'd found a house in Westerville. He mentioned, casually, that they were a little short on the down payment. He mentioned, casually, that he'd been thinking about the equity in my house and whether I'd considered downsizing. I let him talk. Then I said, "Trevor, I need you to stop." He stopped. "I know what you took. I know how much, and I need you to understand something." I kept my voice very even. "The house is in a trust. Your name is not on it, and it never will be. My accounts have been restructured. There is nothing for you to access." Silence. Long silence. "When did you—" "Before the wedding," I said. "After I found out what you did." He said I was being cold. He said I was treating him like a criminal. He said family doesn't do this to each other. He said some other things that I won't repeat because they don't matter, and because I refuse to give them any more space in my memory than they've already taken. I said, "You are my son. I love you. But you are not entitled to what I worked for. Not $1 of it. If you want a relationship with me, you will need to figure out how to begin paying back what you took, and you will need to do it without being asked." Then I hung up. January and February were quiet. I didn't hear from Trevor. I won't pretend that didn't hurt, because it did. There's no version of this story where it doesn't hurt. You don't raise a child from a helpless, milk-drunk newborn to a grown man and then feel nothing when he chooses money over you. You feel it. You just decide what you're going to do with the feeling. I started filling my days differently. I volunteered 2 mornings a week at a senior resource center downtown, helping people navigate Medicare paperwork, which I understood better than most. I started walking every morning. I joined a book club at the library, which I'd been meaning to do for 15 years. I was not waiting for Trevor. I was living. In March, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize, a Columbus area code. The voice on the other end was a woman, older, maybe my age. She asked if she was speaking with Wanda. I said yes. She introduced herself. Her name was Helene. She said she was Sasha's mother. I almost hung up. I didn't, only because something in her voice stopped me. She didn't sound aggressive or defensive. She sounded tired in a way I recognized. The tiredness of someone who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and finally doesn't know where else to put it down. She asked if we could meet. I said I needed to know why. She said she had information about Trevor and Sasha that she thought I deserved to hear. We met at a diner in Guyana the following Tuesday. She was there when I arrived. A small woman with silver hair and reading glasses pushed up on her head. She stood when she saw me come in, like she'd been raised right. I noticed that. We sat. We ordered coffee. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "I want to start by saying that I am sorry for what happened to you. I know what my daughter and your son did. I found out about the account in January. Sasha told me during an argument." I looked at her. She continued. She said she had tried to intervene. She said she had told Sasha in no uncertain terms that what they'd done was theft, regardless of what the bank technically called it. She said Sasha had minimized it, justified it, told her that I had plenty of money and Trevor was going to pay it back. "She's not going to pay it back," Helene said quietly. "I don't think she ever intended to. I don't think she ever intended to. I don't think Trevor did either." I already knew that, but hearing it from someone else, from the mother of the woman who married my son, made it settle into me differently. Then Helene said something I wasn't expecting. She said, "There's something else." About why I called you specifically, not just to apologize for my daughter. She wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. She told me that 6 years ago, before she and her husband retired, they'd been approached by Trevor. He'd come to them separately without Sasha knowing. He'd told them a version of his financial situation, which was worse than either of us had realized, and he'd asked them for money. They'd given him a loan, $15,000. He'd never paid it back. When they'd brought it up after the engagement, he convinced Sasha that the loan had been a gift, that her parents had offered it freely. Sasha had believed her husband over her own parents. "He's done this before," Helene said. "To you, to us. I don't know who else." We sat there in that diner for almost 2 hours. By the end, I wasn't crying and neither was she. But we were both very tired and very honest with each other in the way that sometimes happens between two women who've been made fools of by people they loved. I drove home and I sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd found out about the missing $43,000, and I thought for a long time. The next morning, I called Priscilla. I told her I wanted to file a civil suit, not because I expected to get all the money back, but because I wanted a legal record. I wanted documentation. I wanted Trevor to stand in front of a judge and have a judgment entered against him. Priscilla said that with Helene's willingness to testify about the pattern of behavior, we had a stronger case than she'd initially thought. We filed in April. Trevor called when he received the paperwork. He was not apologetic this time. He was furious. He said I had betrayed him. He said I was destroying the family. He said his father would be ashamed of me. That last one landed. I won't pretend it didn't. I held the phone and I felt it land. Then I said, "Your father worked 7 days a week for 30 years to help build what you stole from me. Do not use him to justify what you did." He hung up on me. The case took 8 months. There were delays, continuances, a period where Trevor filed a counterclaim that went nowhere. Helene testified. My financial records were submitted. Priscilla was thorough and prepared and did not let the opposing side bully her. The judge awarded me $38,000. Not the full amount, but substantial. She cited the pattern of financial deception and noted that while the joint account withdrawal was legally ambiguous, the totality of the conduct represented civil fraud. Trevor was ordered to begin repayment on a structured schedule. Sasha filed for divorce 2 months after the judgment came down. I don't know why exactly, and I don't ask questions about it. Some things don't require my understanding. Trevor called me in January, this January. 14 months after that last ugly phone call. His voice was different again, but this time it was lower, quieter, scraped out, like something had happened to it. He asked if he could come over. I said yes. I don't fully know why. Maybe because I'm his mother. Maybe because 64 years of living teaches you that people are not only the worst thing they've ever done, even when the worst thing was terrible. Maybe because I thought of that little boy in the pajamas standing at the door. He came on a Sunday afternoon. He looked thinner. He sat at my kitchen table, the same table, and he didn't make excuses. He said, "I know what I did. I knew it when I did it." I told myself a lot of stories about why it was okay, and none of them were true. I didn't say anything. I let him talk. He said he'd started seeing a therapist. He said the therapist had helped him understand some things about how he'd processed his father's death, the panic, the grabbing, the inability to trust that stability could last. I recognized what he was describing. I'd seen it in him for years and not known what to call it. I told him I wasn't ready to pretend it hadn't happened. He said he wasn't asking me to. I told him the money mattered less to me than the choice, that he had looked at everything I'd built, everything his father and I had built, and decided it was available to him. He didn't argue. He just sat there and took it. We didn't hug when he left. He stood at the door and I stood in the hallway and he said, "I'll keep making the payments. I'm not going to stop." I said, "I know." And then he was gone, and I went back to my kitchen and I put the kettle on and I stood at the window and watched the backyard go dark. I don't know what Trevor and I will become. I genuinely don't. Some mothers will read this and think I should have shut the door entirely. Some will think I should have let it go years ago. I don't think either of those women is wrong. I just think I'm still figuring out what I am. What I know is this. I came into my retirement with $180,000 saved and a paid-off house and a son I thought I understood. I lost $51,000. I got back a judgment for $38,000. I have a house that is protected. I have a life I've rebuilt around things that have nothing to do with him. The book club, the volunteer work, the early mornings with my coffee, and the sunrise over the fence. I also know that I never begged, not once. Raymond would have understood that. There are women my age who are told, constantly, that our job is to be grateful and soft and careful, not to make things difficult. That family means swallowing things. That love means accepting whatever your children decide to do to you. I worked night shifts for 31 years. I held strangers' hands when they were dying. I buried my husband. I raised my son alone. I am not soft. I am not a pushover. And I am not finished. The greatest thing I learned from all of this wasn't about money, and it wasn't even about Trevor. It was about me. I learned that I had built something real. Not just financially, though yes, financially, I had been smart and careful, and it saved me. But something in myself, a foundation. And when my son tried to sell the ground out from under me, he found out it wasn't his to sell. It never was. I've thought a lot about what made Trevor believe he could do what he did, not the mechanics of it. The joint account, the legal technicality, the window of opportunity I unknowingly left open. I mean the deeper belief underneath all of it. The belief that what I built was somehow also his to take. That my labor, my discipline, my 31 years of night shifts and careful saving had quietly transferred into something he was entitled to. That belief didn't come from nowhere. I have to be honest about that. Some of it came from me, from the years I said yes when I should have said let me think, from the times I covered things quietly because I didn't want him to struggle the way I had. I thought I was protecting him. What I was actually doing was teaching him that there would always be a safety net, and that the net had no conditions attached. What I know now is that love without boundaries isn't love. It's a slow erosion of both people involved. Trevor didn't become the man who walked into that credit union all at once. He became that man in increments, and some of those increments happened in my own kitchen. But here is the other side of that. The choices we make in moments of crisis reveal who we actually are, not who we hoped we'd become, not who people assumed we were. When I found out what Trevor had done, I had a choice. I could collapse under it, or I could act from the clearest, most grounded version of myself I could locate. I chose to act. I called Priscilla the next morning. I protected the house. I filed the suit. None of that was easy, but all of it was available to me because I had spent decades building not just savings, but judgment. That's the thing about character. You don't build it in the emergency. You build it in all the ordinary days before the emergency arrives, and when the moment comes, you either have it or you don't. I had it, not because I'm exceptional, but because I'd done the quiet, unglamorous work of paying attention to my own life. Trevor is paying back the judgment. Slowly but consistently. We talk sometimes, not the way we used to. Not yet. Maybe not ever again in exactly the same way. But we talk. I don't know what that becomes. I stopped trying to write the ending of that particular story. What I do know is that Helene calling me was not an accident. It was the result of a woman deciding that honesty mattered more than protecting her own discomfort. That took courage. Real courage. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't get applauded. I respect her for it more than I've told her. And I know that the house is mine. The savings are mine. The mornings on the back porch are mine. I did not hand those things over, and I did not let anyone convince me I owed them what I'd earned. If you take anything from what I've shared, let it be this: protect yourself. Not out of fear, not out of bitterness, but out of respect for your own work. Know what you have. Know who has access to it, and understand that love, real love, doesn't ask you to disappear into it. I didn't beg. Not once.